And welcome back. One single tweet on day one of the Republican National Convention set off a firestorm. You remember this. It generated headlines around the world suggesting that Melania Trump plagiarized parts of Michelle Obama's speech from 2008. One example of how social media drove convention news. Now, during the RNC, by the way, all said 27.9 million people on Facebook. They generated 167.5 million likes, posts, comments, and shares. Let's go to the DNC. Fewer users, 27 million, just by a hair, but they generated more likes, posts, and comments and shares, 182 million all said. For a look at some of the most popular hashtags, how they spark news and talk, Jason Johnson rejoins us, politics director at The Roots. He joins us right now. So those are some of the high-level numbers here, Jason. You've been studying the Twitter accounts of delegates, because obviously you have a life. There's a lot of data here. Who won at the end the Twitter battle? We were just talking about Facebook.
Well, I would say that it's probably the Democratic Party won the Twitter battle. There's a lot of work being done by the Corvus MSL group. I was doing some research with them. They followed every single delegate who had a Twitter account. And it was interesting to see that at least initially you had more Republicans with Twitter accounts. Right. Their most active account people were in Arizona, but it was the Democrats who just produced more Twitter comments over and over and over again. And it was mostly the Bernie Sanders people.
No doubt that's consistent to the primaries, right? And as you were looking at this stuff, what were some of the hot topics?
Well, some of the hot topics were, of course, Ted Cruz and how people felt about Ted Cruz. He was generating, but also on the Democratic side, it wasn't Bernie Sanders. It was Nina Turner, who's was very popular. She's on MSNBC all the time. She's a former state senator. Her anger, her frustration, her refusal to go along with the Democratic Party, that drove more Bernie supporters and more delegates than anything else at the DNC.
Nina does bring some fire, doesn't she?
Yeah,
she certainly does. We both know her well. As you look at this, some insider news that maybe popped out, that often is a source or an initial indication for us news folks that we're looking on Twitter and somebody let something out?
Well, yeah. I mean, some of the things that came out was, part of why Nina Turner ended up having a lesser role in the Democratic convention than we initially thought was because she was trending online. And DNC officials were like, we're not going to let that happen. A lot of her responsibilities ended up going to Marcia Fudge. After what happened with Debbie Wasserman Schultz, they were not going to allow her to not only get on stage and possibly attack Hillary Clinton or criticize the Clinton administration, let alone be the #1 trending person on Twitter. So we learned from social media also leads to what actually happens in the Democratic Party and on the campaign trail.
How were the messages delivered on social media, Twitter and Facebook, and which of the platforms was the better place to do that if you were either a Democrat running the convention or Republican running their convention?
Well, for the Republicans, it was Facebook, and in large part because Republican voters tend to be whiter and they tend to be older, and the fastest growing groups on Facebook are married women over the age of 50. So Facebook was a better way to communicate. For the Democratic Party, it was obviously on Twitter. That was going to move faster. They have more young people. They have more people who are involved. But here's what's interesting. Everything that ends up on Twitter that ends up trending, it gets picked up by the news, which then gets filtered to people like my older brother, who's 45 years old, who's not even on Twitter. So the more you trend, the more you get picked up by TV.
Well, let's talk about Snapchat, widely used by us journalist folks, and it seems to be the place now if you want to reach young voters, and are perfect for these live events.
Yeah, because one of the things about Snapchat is, first off, your snaps are going to be for 24 hours, so it gives people the feeling like they've got a ticket. They're getting into an event that's just for this short period of time. Bernie Sanders popularized it. Snapchat's been around for 5 years. It premiered in 2011, but it's been the 2015-2016 campaign that's really turned into one of the hottest social media platforms out there.
You know, Jason, you and I like to talk about this every cycle. This is the social media election. We can look back at 2008. We said that about that election. How is this the social media election?
Well, I think we've seen it in several different ways. I mean, we had the sit-in at the House, which was through Periscope. We've got Bernie Sanders, who's on Snapchat. We've got Donald Trump communicates primarily through Twitter. So this has become the election. And, of course, in 2020, we're going to say something different. But this is the election where social media has dominated how not only the candidates are communicating, but how most people are learning about what's happening on the campaign.
At Dr. Jason Johnson. That's where you'll find him. Thank you so much, Jason. You have a good Saturday.
Thanks, man.
That's all for me this afternoon.